Welcome back to the WOOK Club.
It's Dead
Joined by
Week.
T, and it is Dead Week. We have 5/16/93, a Vegas show, and I think T has a great little story to kick us off.
Yeah, this was one of the shows I was actually in attendance for. It was the first year we went to Vegas, my crew out of college. It was one of those things, you saw it on the list and we were like, holy crap, they're playing Vegas, we have to go. Did the mail order. I think this was also the first year we like decorated the envelopes to try and get an advantage. Right, exactly, an advantage to the tickets. We all ended up actually getting them though, and all 3 nights. I think they had played in 92 as well, but we didn't go that year because I was kind of my summer going into college and was doing a lot of other stuff, so I wasn't really prepared for it. But this year we made the trip. We took like I think 3 cars out, filled them up with everybody, drove out. It was, it was old Vegas too, like how it used to be. It was, it was still a no tolerance state, so it's like smoking weed there was a little hectic, like even having seeds was a little hectic back in the day when you didn't want dead stickers on your car just for the fear that cops would pull you over because of that type thing. Like it was kind of that the paranoia
Roscoe in Nevada, right? Did you drive down through the Four Corners?
No, we just took, what is it, 70? I think it's 70, like through
into Utah and then down.
Yeah, and then down from there, kind of the same way I always drove to California from Denver. So yeah, but it was fun. I mean, we got there. I can't remember where we stayed this year. I think it might have been Caesars. I can't remember. We always stayed somewhere new every time we went, but it was hotter than hell. I do remember that. All 3 years I went, it was hotter than hell. Like Vegas in June and May were ridiculously warm. I'm surprised the band, like we were talking about backstage, I'm surprised the band picked. I think this was early enough in May where they felt like it wasn't quite going to be hot enough, but March or April probably would have been a little bit better for them at that point. But
early April shows would have been 80 degrees and perfect.
Totally, right? Like just hot. That's one thing I remember, but it was a fun run. All 3 nights were very fun. This was my favorite of the 3. It had what I considered one of the best set lists I really ever got to see. Set list wise, I think the first set I loved. The second set was so on point with, I mean, coming out of a help slip Frank with a Terrapin, the jam, the other one. Like it was a lot of fun. It was a really good show with all of that. So yeah, we can jump into it.
Did you get a chance? Did you get in early to see Sting any of the nights?
I did. Yeah, we did. Which again was sort of an odd. You're like, Sting, huh? Okay, that's an odd opener for the Dead, but it was good. He was actually really fun to see and played kind of a combination of newer stuff and a couple, classic Police tunes and stuff, and it worked. And I talked about this before with the Stub Me Down guys about openers for the Dead. It's kind of fun to have openers. Like this year was Sting, next year was Traffic, and the following year was Dave Matthews, which that one made the most sense because he was like an up and coming jammer and not an older, whatever you want to call it. Like Traffic was awesome because I love Traffic and it was fun to see Stevie Winwood. But Sting was kind of an odd choice. It worked, but I always love the fact that they had an opener. Even when I saw my first show, which I think we'll do next month as the Dead show, but Santana was the opener. So it was like always very cool.
I think Jerry was a Sting fan because when Sting, that tour, RFK, Jerry came out for Walking on the Moon and played.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Then Sting should have come out and done Standing on the Moon with Jerry.
There you go. That would have been the correct answer. But yeah, I mean, I've seen Sting outside of seeing him with the Dead before, and even this last Ronaldo Beach. I mean, between his solo stuff and the Police stuff, he does an hour and a half of hits. Like 80% of the songs.
That's just it. And I love it when guys do that. Like when I saw Tom Petty too, it was all the classics. Like, and even ZZ Top at that same festival, it's all the classics. It's no crap. Like you're not like, oh, a new song, great, let me get through that. It's like all the classics that and you're singing, and sometimes there's guests. Like it was, yeah, exactly. And I even went and saw the Police reunion tour at Dodger Stadium, and that was fantastic. Like I was a huge Police fan. I never thought they'd play. So even going to that was like so awesome, like everything you wanted to hear. So yeah, it's funny that Fish doesn't do that. You know what I mean? Like there's such a one one band. And even at Monday Green, it's surprising that they don't pull, like we were talking backstage about Iggy and stuff, that they don't pull an up and coming jam band to open for them, just to kind of give them a little bit of props and let people have
Oswego. At Oswego they tried that. They had Del McCoury and Sun Seals, I think, play.
But it would make sense because people were in the lot anyway. It would give you something to do if you got in early, or not have to worry about getting in early necessarily, and know that there's another band. You know what I mean? And I feel like it would.
I've been suggesting to bands, you guys should buy Monday Green passes and just hang out in the lot and set up.
Total, dude, that's a brilliant idea. Like, Tim should do that with his band. I guess it's kind of hard to lug your instruments around and keep them there and shit, but do an acoustic set or something. That would be so fun. Totally. Some bands should do that. That's a good idea, Kev. Should do that.
There we go. All right, let's jump into this.
Let's do it.
We got classic Touch of Grey opener. Listening to it, I didn't hear any sparks. It was not like a portent of something great coming. It was kind of like, it's hot. You could tell. It sounded like they were tired already.
Night 3, right? Day 3, I think they were a little tired. I know the audience was a little tired. 3 days in the sun and nights of being out in Vegas, it wears on you. Because you get done with a show, and Vegas is the perfect town to have post-show activities in. So you kind of rage all night and then get up the next day and it's hotter than hell and you go do it again. So I think they were probably in that same boat. I don't think they were out raging all night, but getting older and having to deal with it. Yeah. And I think you're right. The Touch of Grey, while very on the line, I think this is one we use a lot. It was serviceable. It was an odd opener to be serviceable, but it was a good, it was just decent. It didn't do anything spectacular for you. And it kind of opened and you were like, Sunday night. Okay. Okay. Nothing raging yet, but I liked it. It was, that song, especially with years past now, and hindsight looking back on it, at that time, it was such a, poppy, their big hit type song that it got so much crap, when you heard it, then you're like, oh, Touch of Grey, really, there's nothing else I could open with. But now going back and listening to it, you're like, it's fun,
the we will survive, the I will survive through the whole song, and then the end when they're all step up and they're like, we will survive. It's a great line, and it's great for a rock and roll show. It's a big rock and roll show. No.
It is, and it's just, I don't know, Jerry running through the lyrics and the way they all rhyme together, and the little story, and then whistle through your teeth and spit and all that stuff. Right. It's very them, you know what I mean?
Hunter said that he wrote that after being up for 2 days on cocaine. That's when he wrote that lyric. So.
And it's a really pure Hunter lyric, though. Every silver lining's got a touch of gray. It's very them. Perfect. I will say that, very them. So
I have an acoustic version of just Hunter doing it for the demo somewhere on a tape. And the lyrics are, he's like the ABCs of a fastball curve. Some of the lyrics are different.
See, and that sounds like the Willys and 4-wheel drive line, right? When he meshes those kind of things in there, you're like, yeah, stick to the nostalgia.
The styrofoam cue balls made of styrofoam. Styrofoam always took me out of half step because I'm like, that doesn't belong in this song. That word.
Right? Yeah, that's true. It's a funny line.
Right. Then we get arguably Bobby's best blues song for me. And I think they started to loosen up, and it was at this point that I was like, wow, Vince is making himself known tonight.
I totally agree with you on that first statement, actually both statements, but the first one especially, this is one of my favorite Bobby Blues songs, if not my favorite Bobby Blues song, especially the version, as we always say, on Without a Net is so classic. Everything on Without a Net is so classic and good, but having that as your real barometer that I always listen to, that CD was a staple in my car constantly. So having that version as kind of in the back of your head, but I love this. I love it more than Little Red Rooster. I love it more than so many of his other bluesy tunes. And this one, this was where it started to get a little bit better for you open a Touch of Grey, you go into kind of this bluesy, and you start, now you can start okay, getting down. And to your point, Vince starts out here. And I mean, what he does in this whole show, that was really one of the reasons I chose this one. Was I know how much we talk about Vince, and you're such a Vince stan. Mm-hmm. I thought you'd appreciate this show a lot because he really shines in this show.
I wish he had Brent's organ though.
Yeah,
because the organ on that keyboard, it just doesn't have the bottom end. It doesn't have that underneath it.
And at times it feels very light, so to speak, especially with how hard he's playing it. And we'll get to that, especially in like the Franklins, where it really comes out and shines, but it feels like it could be a little bit deeper and a little bit harder, which would really bring it out. It also could be something to do with the mix that we were listening to, and like not, you know, the bootlegs that we could hear not being exactly soundboard quality, but still this was where Vince started to come out. And I really liked this version of Bobby doing it. And it was a fun little, all right. Yes.
Yeah. Now the Althea, Jerry was shining. Jerry was comfortable, totally eased into everything. And this may be one of the best post Brent Altheas I think I've heard.
I was going to say, wasn't it nice to hear a classic Althea? And again, off of Without a Net, right? We got 2 back-to-back Without a Net tunes here together. And yes, like hearing this one, all I can think about these days are like the Mayer versions, you know, and how good they are and how different they are with what he does with it and makes it his own and jams and stuff. But it's so nice to hear classic Althea. Like, it's just, and this was one where I was extremely excited to get. Like, you get a Walkin' Blues into Althea. I was like, oh, yes, like, all right. Fantastic. And like I was saying, this first set for me is like one of, on paper especially, is one of my favorite first sets. Like, this thing just hits all the markers for me. And Althea, like you said, Jerry starts to like, it was like he cooled down but heated up. You know what I mean? Like, he cooled down in the space, but then he was able to
crowd when he lays into the Spaces Getting Hotline, the crowd goes wild. I mean,
yes, always. Like, but he really, I love it when he leans into certain lines. Like, he does that a couple times in this show, and it really like is poignant, right? Like, it's very Jerry, and it's very like those moments. And even in '93, you know, this show reminds me very much of '93. It's very much a time capsule of that time and how they sounded, you know, which is like one of those interesting things too, because it was in that space, like we said, like Vince was very key, and like just kind of what they do in the other one, which we'll get to with the sound effects and that kind of thing. It was very much of that time. And when you go back and listen to it, it really is a time capsule of '93 Dead. And I thought, you know, certain songs really do stand out. And I think the next couple too stand out as songs that were highlights of the show and of that time.
Jerry basically made Masterpiece into a duet. I think he sang 90% of the lines with Weir on this one, which is really cool because Garcia Band did Masterpiece before the Dead started doing it with Bobby singing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jerry singing it a lot, you know, and again, it's one of those Bobby songs that when he fully owns it, I appreciate Bobby singing it so much. Like, he really does a good job with it. It kind of fits his, especially these days, his storytelling style of singing and the way he likes to go through things, even back then. So this was one of those, like, and this song, a funny, like, personal story. I was with my best friend, who was one of my best men at my wedding, was tripping his face off at this show, like, I mean, bad shape. And he got separated from us before the show even started because he was just like in his own world. And he was like, he told me this afterwards, but he was like in a puddle, basically laying outside of the main concourse venue, like in the little area outside, and was just like a mess for the first 3 songs. He heard Masterpiece come on, and that's kind of when it all came back to him. Like, he was able to get back into his zone because he was a huge fan of the song. He's like, oh my God, Masterpiece came on. And I was like, back into it. And then from then on, it was like the greatest trip. Every time I hear this song and this version of it at this show, I always think of that. And I'm like, man, it takes me right back to those days. He did. Yeah, nice. He did. He found me by the second set, wandering around. I ran into him and grabbed him, and we ended up having to help Slip Frank together, which was one of those, another great memory that we had of just jamming on that one. So
I had a buddy at RFK, I guess the year before, same thing. He disappeared, and then he showed up midway during the first set, found us on the floor at RFK, and 20,000, 30,000 people. We're like, dude, what happened? I got abducted by aliens, man. And we were like, cool.
Yeah, he's like, dude, you have no idea. Like, I was laying there, like, on the ground, holding onto the grass, like, trying not to fall off the earth. And he's like, the only thing going through my head was, should I just go surrender myself to the medics and be like, help me, like, I'm tripping my face, like, what do I do, you know? And then this came on, and he was able to stand up, and I know, ever, right? But like, that's where the state of mind was. And he was like, and then Masterpiece came on, and it just all flowed back into me, and I like got my life back. And like, which is funny how the Dead can do that to you. And to your point, the magic of like running back into people. Like it works. Like
no cell phone. It wasn't like you texted somebody, right. Where are you? Oh, dude, we're behind Phil's speakers, you know.
Which is probably good though, because cell phones and trimming were so hard anyway. Like it's probably a good thing that it was just using the cosmic guide to find you back to where you needed to go.
Exactly. So I am not a Road Jimmy person, as we've discussed before, but I found this version interesting. Vince was doing not normal stuff. He was playing like against Jerry a little bit, like a little counterpoint, and I found it fascinating. The song still plods along for me, but
I know you're not a fan of it. This is another one of those. I love Jerry singing this one. The grass shack nailed to a pine wood floor is one of my favorite lines.
The jukebox line is my favorite. 2-bit piece don't buy no more, not so much as it done before. Yeah, that's a great line.
That's a great line. I think there's a lot of great lines in the song. I always love Jerry's delivery in it. I love his just the way he you don't like the plotting, but I like the plotting the way through it. Like it's one of those songs that just does it for me so much. Like the storyline in it, the lyrics.
It sounds like water lapping on the shore.
Yeah. It does. Like it's very much that, you know what I mean? That song. And it's always kind of that first set staple, you know, that you get a lot in the first set. So for me, it was like, again, one of these classic first sets where you're getting a Road Jimmy in there. I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. And to your point, it was a little bit different of a Road Jimmy, you know, like you had Vince doing Vince things in it, which again, Vince standing out in the show was so interesting, like where he really kind of was like, okay, I'll take, like everyone else is tired today. Everyone else is like, whatever, I'll stand up and take sort of that backup lead position and really fill in a lot of the fills and be there in different places where maybe I'm not always at, or where we haven't really had spaces filled before. And this was one of those moments, and it's just a great version of Road Jimmy. I felt like again, once you got out of the touch of Gray, everything kind of like started flowing. The band started flowing. Jerry sounded better. It really got into some good places. And this was one of those, you know, moments that you're like, okay, yes, another great classic Dead song. Even though, again, like we said, 93, it still sounded really good for when it was.
You know, and Jerry kept it together, knew all the words.
Which again, surprising, right? Like he did a lot of that in this show, which again, hit or miss at this time, you know, like 90s versions of a lot of these songs could be a little mumbly or a little like skip a verse and then come back into it and figure out where you're at. But yeah.
Then we get Cassidy. I feel like Cassidy, we begin to hear some wear on Bobby's vocals. Like he was starting to lose his voice a little bit, but a really solid Cassidy, great space section in it.
Great. You know, we always talk about those closers. It's sort of that, you know, that run of songs of like, you know, Let It Grow, Weather Report, Sweet, Cassidy, Birdsong. Like I always consider all those songs sort of together in like their own little
deal. I always want Cassidy and Deal together. I thought a deal should have been tacked onto the end of this.
Totally. Because Cassidy's good by itself, but it always feels like it sets up something. Like it sets up a bird song. It sets up the next song to close it. So, but I think to your point, this was a tired first set. Bobby's voice was starting to go.
It was hot. They didn't want to be out in 102 degrees.
No, and I think this was, you know, we said it was a shorter first set. You know what I mean? I think it was more like, let's get off, let's let it cool down a little bit. Hopefully the sun goes down more and we can come out in the second set and play a little bit longer, a little bit more, and have a little bit more energy. Let's all get some water, get some hydration in us.
I read something on who knows what website I was on, but they said that somebody was saying the set break was almost an hour.
Yeah, it was a little bit longer, which sucked for us because you're just dying in the heat, right? Like I
need the music.
You're like, oh my God, where are they? Like you got the fan, like your hand fans and like paper fans going, and everyone's just shirts off, and it just smelled like hell in there. Like it was
humanity.
Rough.
Smelled like mortality.
So it did. But I think this was a perfect example of cutting it short. Like, let's end on Cassidy. Like Bobby, again, sounding a little weak. You need some water. His voice was shot, as you pointed out. Like it really was. You hear it in the second set too. So it was just sort of like, let's get out of it. Let's take the break here. Still though, great first set for me. Like I loved it. Like the set list was fantastic, a little condensed, but I think that was a good thing. They didn't push it. They didn't try to throw that extra song on there and they just like left it as a short condensed first set, which was nice.
Yeah. And we're going to do a little housekeeping here. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, WOOK plus Live as always. We're going to be talking about all the latest. On Thursday, 1 o'clock, we got panels and frames for our pop culture, comic book minded, Marvel, DC type of people. And Sunday morning, we're starting a new thing called Fish Tales, where Tim is going to be interviewing people about every festival leading up to Monday Green. So Sunday morning will be put on the shelf. And the same schedule will be next week. Let's jump into this set too. And let me just say, why did Bobby pick Samson when he knew his voice was going to open, and then do a Looks Like Rain later when he knew his voice was going? But anyway, Samson, I mean, it's Sunday, in case you all forgot. It's Sunday. Let me remind you, let's go to church a little bit. Bobby loved reveling, loves being God, estimated Samson, all these things where he's like the prophets, the misfit power guy. And
he does, and he loves getting into it. Great gosh almighty now.
Samson rocks. Such a great addition that they found after the 76 break.
Yeah.
That it came up and it ended up on the Terrapin album and really became a staple from the moment it entered the repertoire.
And it usually, like we just talked about with the ending of the first set up something good to come. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like you get to feel like a stranger to open a show and you're like, okay, tonight's going to be an interesting, fun night. You get a Samson either to open or as a second song in that second set.
Right, like a shakedown Samson or something.
Right.
Just like,
and you're like, okay, this set's going to be fun. Like, something's coming. Something out of this is going to be good. And yeah, Bobby's vocals, like, I'm surprised we know why, because it's Bobby, and like he's not afraid just to like do it until it dies, and like it can be rough.
They had a break, right? They had a good 2 weeks before they picked up on the East Coast, maybe even 3 weeks before. Right. So he knew that I got to make it through tonight.
Yeah, it was exactly that, and just like, let me get through tonight and let me play what I want to play, and then I can take my break. But you come out with it, and again, I love things I always loved about the Dead, the little things like, going into the venue, how awesome that always was. Also, like the tinkering before first and second set would begin, and they're up there playing with the instruments, and you're always trying to guess, what are they going to go into? What are they going to go into? And the Samson intro is always so fun. The dun, 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 you know what I mean? The drums come in and you're like, yes, all right, here we go. And then like, yeah, it's the Sunday sermon song. Like, give it to me.
Step up. And like you said, Samson is the prequel to greatness, and the help on the way was a little rough, but by the time they hit Slipknot, they were firing on all cylinders.
I agree. And Samson was about 8 minutes, I guess, with the tinkering. It came in probably closer to like 7.5 minutes at the beginning, but then it was only like a 4-minute help on the way, like a pretty short help. To your point, like, it kind of was like, let's get through it. It was a little rough. It wasn't the greatest version of a help. It was more about them playing. And I think at that time, especially after the Samson, the crowd went absolutely bonkers when you drop into it. You're like, oh yes, yes, we're getting a help slip for, fantastic. Like, this is what a Sunday show is. Give it to me.
Right.
So it was kind of more about getting into it. The Slipknot, I thought, was, coming in at almost 6 minutes, a great little bridge there, and it gave them a chance to rest their voices and not have to sing. Like, I think they appreciated that.
And to settle into, Help on the Way isn't an easy song to play. Samson's pretty straightforward. 4 on the floor, Help on the Way is a little more jazzy, a little more complex. And, as much as there was a little flubs, the Slipknot, they coerced around it, and then they dropped it into the Franklins, and fantastic Franklins. And I guess you're going to speak to this, Vince. What's up, Vince?
I mean, again, like, is there anything better than a drop into Franklin's? Like, when it's coming and the crowd is ready for it, and you hit that, and it's that moment of energy, right? Like, it just explodes. You're just like, there's few songs that do that, getting the headlight in a northbound train in Colorado when he hits that line. That was one of those moments. But like, dropping into a Franklin's, no matter where you are, whatever show it is, it's always special.
And the crowd everyone's moving, arms flying, legs flying.
And then you just start jamming and you just start getting down. And, it was almost a 12-minute Franklin's. Like it went off, like it went and went.
And Vince would have made it go longer if Jerry hadn't have kind of been like, all right, come on, we're going back. We're going to sing some now.
Well, and I'll tell you, at about, Vince from the start is sort of in there, right? He's kind of in that background area. About the 6-minute mark is where the first time I really hear him take over after Jerry finishes his lyrics. Vince comes in with the keys and does his thing for about 45 seconds, whatever. Jerry goes back into his lyrics. Then they come out of that part, and it's about the 7-minute mark, from 7 to like almost 9 minutes.
Listen to the music play part.
Vince just takes off, man, just covers it so well. And even stepping into that, before that, he was like kind of what he did with Road Jimmy. He was like answering Jerry. Jerry would say a line and then Vince would do, and then Jerry would say the next line and then Vince would answer him with a, like, it was really cool to listen to, like a really different take on sort of that fill-in again behind Jerry and then next to Jerry. And it was really something to listen to. Like I highly recommend going back and really listen to that Franklin's if you haven't, or even if you haven't, give it another listen to and really listen for Vince in there, because he does some magical stuff like coming through. And then the way he sort of fades it out at that 8.5 minute mark to kind of like settle it back into the song and where they are, and then set up the next run to kind of get us through to the 11-minute mark, 12-minute mark. It's fantastic. Jerry nails the lyrics. The roll away, the dues are in there. You get confused, listen to the music play, nails it. People are like, getting down. Like it was a fun time.
Every line in that song could stand on its own pretty much as being a fantastic line,
It's so true. Like there's so many good ones. Plant ice, you're gonna harvest wind. Like there's so many.
I've lived my life by that. I've always tried to remember that.
Like it's just so good. And when it's on, and when Jerry doesn't forget things, it's so much, like especially at this stage of where they were.
Right.
It just worked. It was like the perfect, fantastic, like just awesome.
Right. And then Bobby decides to serve up some cheese. I've always been, I like the end of Looks Like Rain, because Jerry just goes to town on the little trills over and over again. But the song itself, I'm like, I don't want to hear this story right now.
I think it was also
Street Cats Making Love line is goofy as shit. Come on.
Street Cats Making Love, like totally. That's the one that always sticks out in my head too. I think this was one of those wishful thinking songs too, like Looks Like Rain in the middle of the desert. You're like, just like, oh, cool us down. Like, please give me some rain. But yeah, Bobby's voice was a little bit more shot by now, a little bit,
and then he's trying to rain, no more rain,
yeah,
like, dude,
always.
You got other songs, you got like an hour left.
And he can't not cheese himself at the end sometimes, and you're just like, dude, maybe just let it go, but he can't. He's turning gray. It looks like, like he's got to like belt those last minute and a half of the song or whatever and get it out, and you're just like, oh, sometimes it's tough. And that's it. It fits after the Help Slip Frank sometimes, like it fits into that position, because we always talk about the cool down song or what you need after that. So I get why they play it. It's just, to your point, like you said, it's not my favorite Bobby tune. Like I put up with it because it fits in places. When it doesn't fit in places, it's even worse. And you're like, oh God, really? We got to look like Rain.
I always wished Looks Like Rain had have lived. It's the penultimate song in the first set. Like it Looks Like Rain deal. I think that would have been the perfect place for it. A little cool down before you rip everybody a new one on the closer,
Man, that's such a good place for it, honestly. Like it just never, the second set, it's like we talk about with Fish a lot. It's just such a set killer sometimes, and in the second set, you need a cool down song, but there's other good songs for that to fill in that position. Like this one's a little too much. It really does feel like it could have lived in the first set a lot and been a lot better there, and you could have put up with it more because you knew something burning would come after it. Which, I mean, you get something burning after it here, which I think going into a Terrapin, like, yes, we'll take that. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine. And it kind of, again, sets it up, but you don't always get that after it. Like, you're hoping you're getting something like that after it. Whereas in the first set, to your point, I think you'd always get a rager to close the set. So that would work a little bit better. But the Terrapin here, great choice. Again,
Terrapin always does what it's supposed to do.
Again, giant crowd love from it. Like as soon as they go into it, you're like, oh, we're getting a Terrapin tonight. Fantastic.
We got a Help on the Way Franklin's, and we're getting a Terrapin.
And we're getting a Terrapin. And it was a 11.5 minute Terrapin, like not not a short version of it, like a very good
extended
version.
I would call it 14 because the one I listened to had something called Hot Slots Jam, but it was just a variation on the theme from Terrapin. I mean,
totally, exactly. It just set up that drums though, but yes, it was about a 15-minute version that, like, when you include that sort of jam at the end of it.
Well, they did a lot of that in 93. There was like the Stir It Up jam appeared a few times, you know, Mind Left Body showed back up again.
Love that jam. Yeah, totally. And it's funny, I mean, Hot Slots Jam, and sometimes you're just like, who named that? Like, what? Shit? You're right, exactly. So great version though. Again, Jerry nailed the lyrics. Jerry hit everything. Like, there was a good crescendo with, you know, inspiration. Like, people were like, you know, you got the crowd noise in there. Like, it was very active crowd, I think, too, because it was kind of like you said, there was nothing after the show. It was kind of that Vegas feeling, like you had a lot of like excitement throughout the show, and like when you crush the set or you come out swinging with all these songs, you're making a lot of people happy. Let's just say that. So
drums very short, 7 minutes.
Yeah, a little hectic though, a little intense. Like, it was a good like it was a very, even listening to it back, I was like, whew, these are like, it was a little heavy drums. Yeah, which I like.
But for me, I guess we get into the meat of the show now. The other one, Wharf Run Out of Space. The space was very atmospheric for the first half of it, and then it got into some chunky, noisy things, and which led to the slow build to this other one that, I mean, ones were only 5-6 minutes. This one's over 8 minutes. They really let it breathe.
And even that space was about 8 minutes, like, depending on where you want to time it from where it came into. And on the version on Internet Archive that I listened to too, it was called Elvis Space. So, like, again, leading into that the Vegas feel. I don't quite know why Elvis Space, who named that, but it was in there as that.
I was waiting for like a Viva Las Vegas, even though what was Vince doing at the end of it? Vince was like, there was somebody's voice at the end of that space. I'm assuming it was Vince because this was Vince's show, but.
And I think it set up what they did with Bobby's voice in the other one. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was coming into that. So maybe that's sort of where that came from. But I was wondering too, if they did that to hide some of how shot Bobby's voice was and like give it that little bit of.
I think Healy just didn't like Bobby and fucked with him.
Because it was weird. I mean, like, I don't know whose decision that was. Like, they've done that before.
They did it a bunch. Yeah, those years it happened all the time till Healy disappeared, and then it didn't happen anymore.
Yeah, true. So it was weird though. Like, it kind of, I don't want to say ruins it. It just takes you out of like what the other one is, you know, because it has this weird, and it has this weird echo effect on his voice and like this whole like odd, you know, and you're like, wow, you know, and coming out of space,
and you're thinking, is it me?
But exactly,
is something not right with me? Am I like, what's wrong with my ear?
And that was always the thing, man, was like, I told you how many times like I lose my shit during space and have to get out of the arena and like gather myself again because it was just like too intense. And then you come back and you're like, yes, the other one, but then they're doing this weird thing with the noise. And it's kind of like if you did it at the Sphere or something, it's like it's going in weird places in the arena and coming, you know what I mean? It's not just like, so you're literally
think the other one was spinning when they did it there.
Yeah, like,
I wonder if they mess with the sound inside it, like the coming around, they could get like
totally comment, you know what I mean? And this was, I mean, I do remember that being like, what the fuck? Like, why can't you just play it normal? Like, why is like, and to your point, is it me? Are you hearing it like that? Like, does it sound like we're underwater? Like, what is happening here? Yeah. But
that's why you can't mess with the screens either. At a JFK show once, I asked the woman next to me if they were doing weird stuff with the screens, and she said no, and they were. And I was like, oh man. Yeah, in a spiral. It just sent me in a spiral.
You're like, I'm the only one seeing that. No, it's not me. No.
Taking that last album cover.
So funny, but it was a long other one, like in 8.5, 8 minutes, 8:15 minute other one, like pretty heavy duty. Like it lasted and like went and, you know, had a nice little middle jam in it that then when they came back in, I was hoping they would leave the voice thing off of him, but nope, they came right back into it with the voice thing. You're like, oh, okay, we're going to do this all the way through. Okay, fine.
Right. And then one of the unthought of pairings. You think of Scarlet Fires, you think of China Riders. There were a mess of other one Wharf Rats. Those two songs really loved each other, and I think they really complemented each other. Like other one told the pre-story, and Wharf Rat told the story after.
Yes,
You know, like a cautionary tale. You know,
it became one of those things where you kind of expected or always really wanted a Wharf Rat after the other one, and when you didn't, like sometimes you get a Stella, which was okay, or like you get something in there because
all of them appeared. Your Black Peter might appear, but
yeah,
this one, you know, I feel like I saw out of 80, 90 shows that I saw, I probably saw 15 other one Wharf Rats over that time.
Which was the best pairing though. Like it was my fate. Like it's the best place for the Wharf Rat to kind of be, as opposed to like in other places or after other songs. It's the best thing out of the other one. I feel like it really, to your point, sets it up perfectly. It's almost like a continuation of that story, especially when it drops out of the intense like and then kind of starts calming down, and then you get that first note of the and you're just like, and it gives you that moment too of like, Jerry's gonna tell us a story now. Like, okay, like yes, this beautiful song, like just pure Jerry. It's one of my favorite. Like it's just the best out of it's what you want out of the other one all the time, and to not always get it always like drove me crazy when they didn't do it. It's kind of like the Help Slip, right? Kind of like I saw J Rad at Red Rocks the other night do the Help Slip but no Franklins. And I just don't understand how you don't give people Franklins out of Slip, because it's like you're dying for it. You're like,
or a hydrogen after Mike's.
Amen. And then a week of Pog after the hydrogen. Like you're so built up in the moment, ready for it, to not get it. You're just like, wait, where is it? What? And then to not get it in the show at all, you're just like, what happened? Like, what happened to my Franklins? So I always felt that way, kind of like with the other one going into Wharf Rat. You're just like, oh, okay, Stella Blue is nice, but you know what would really be nice here is a Wharf Rat.
Oh man.
So, but a good version of it. Jerry again nailed it. I thought, like, you know, from 93, you got to take it with a grain of salt of where they were and what it is, and like, you know, everything.
Solid. He got the words right. He got all the words right, and he got all the inflections right, and
everyone loves the Some Other Fuckers Crime line again. Like again, crowd noise in this one was so good. Like everyone was like so into like everything. So yeah.
Do you know that was the first song ever released, the story is, that had the F word on it, because the Airplane had released a song called We Can Be Together or something. I forget which one it was, but they said mother father, but it sounded like they said mother effer. And so they took all the heat, even though they never really did it. So when the DeaD a year and a half later released Wharf Rat in a ballad, it got by all the censors at Warner Brothers, you know.
It's so crazy because it's very subtle though, you know. It's not like you're coming out yelling "fuck you" or "fuck" or anything
like a punk song, right? Yeah,
it's just sort of in there, like spent doing time for some other fucker's crime. Like,
right? It's a line you'd read in a book, right?
And it fits so well. Like you couldn't say anything else for some other loser's line or some other dude's crime. Like you couldn't. Nothing else works in there. Like some other fucker's crime completely encapsulate the emotion that you're getting through, and in the story, like telling the story of this guy who, you know, this happened to, and it's just it's
and you just know that neither one of them have the girl anymore. They're like, yeah, my girl loves me too. Oh, yeah, dude, you guys are sitting on the dock trying to sober up, trying to dry out,
getting exactly.
You got nothing.
Telling these stories.
All right, and then Bobby decided, hey, screw it, I'm just gonna ruin my voice
with back-to-back songs, like not just one but two, to like crush it, just to completely crush it. Throwing Stones, which again, it's a decent enough out of Wharf Rat, because you need to come back up. Like it's like a Not Fade Away, something right like that fits into that with sort of the dun, 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 get the drums going and whatever. Throwing Stones again is one of those 90s sort of bring it in sort of, you know what I mean? Like not exactly what you want to hear.
Bobby threw an F word in there, an F bomb for one of the lines.
Of course,
he was all fired up.
I feel like this song is very Bobby, like it's you know, like where we say Samson's like the classic preaching. This feels like the new version of preachy. You know what I mean? Like his whole like save the earth, screw the politicians.
Political. I mean, they do not do political songs, you know. So that's always been interesting to me.
And this one is very like very much on that level of that. And other than his voice, it's a fun version. Like it's a good sort of, again, it gets the crowd up and going, and you're just sort of
It is
like,
what it is. It isn't going to have a jam. It's so long and has so many lyrics that it isn't
yes.
ever going to have like an extra 5-minute jam in it. It's going to be 10 or 11 minutes because it has so many lyrics.
Of singing. Like it is a lot. It is a packed song. Like it's, comes in just over 9 minutes, and it's a lot of lyrics to get through, like a lot of lyrics. And it is
And
very
then
preachy of Bob. He's like yelling at you, or he's like yelling at, like, you need to stand up and like, dude, like, come on, people, get your shit together. Do something.
The Love Light, you would have blinked if you missed it. I would rather that you don't do Love Light if it's just going to be a 5-minute afterthought.
Yeah, I always tell you how much I don't like sugar mags in that spot. Like, why not? Like a 5-minute sugar mags would be great. Like, why does it have to be 8-9 minutes? But like, it's a Love Light. It's kind of that same thing. Like, why not? You kind of want a 7-8 minute Love Light in there because you want that jam. You want that, like, that middle section that then brings it back in. But I think to the point, kind of like the Cassidy in the first set, at this point, Bobby's voice, he couldn't do the haze and the like shine your, like turn on your light, let it shine, and do the whole drag it out through that 8-9 minute mark. So I think it was just sort of like, we need to end it. We can't end it on Throwing Stones. What can we end it on? And I feel
I saw a Throwing Stones once to close the second set.
It's
and
so
that's
weird.
where I'm not a Throwing Stones, a Touch of Grey. I saw a Touch of Grey to close the second set once, and I was like, that's the perfect place for that song because it's an upbeat Jerry tune. You don't get upbeat Jerry tunes out of space unless it's going down the road, maybe,
That would be really an interesting place for it, actually. It's almost like, okay, let's put Looks Like Rain in the first set somewhere and take Touch of Grey out and put it almost as like a closer somewhere. Like that's an interesting, that would be, I could see that might work, actually. You know what I mean? Like that would be kind of cool because
that might work.
It might work, Cav. It might work. But yeah, the Love Light. I mean, this is where I would like instead of the Throwing Stones Love Light, it's like a Not Fade Away going down the road, Not Fade Away would have been perfect here. Like it really would have like blown me away and like been a perfect way to end this fantastically written set list. Like you know what I mean? Instead you get kind of Throwing Stones Love Light, which again, by this time, especially early 90s, like and going forward from here, you always get those random songs in the second set, like a Karina, like these weird, these secondary songs that you're like, oh man, it's kind of like Fish, where you're like, man, there's such a better, like a Bowie would fit so much better here. Like play something classic instead of like,
did you have to do Sigma Oasis again?
Right. Even like an Everything's Right. Can you just give me like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, yeah, I know Trey Love Set Your Soul Free, but can we get like, you know what I mean? It's just, this is what that felt like. This was sort of that total feeling of at least Love Light's classic, but in this version of it and where Bobby was and what they did with it, 5-minute Love Light is very odd. Like it's a very strange.
Yeah. It was an afterthought. We needed a little exclamation point. Boom. And then the classic, I mean, I think when I think of encore for the Grateful Dead, it's Brokedown. That is the encore,
It's the one you want. Like it's perfect. It's beautiful. It's everything. It's the Dead. Again,
Jerry got the words right.
Yeah.
He was on tonight. He was, he was present, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, even day 3 of the heat and everything, it was good. Like it still brought him. I mean, it was still
maybe he'd sweat all the shit out of his body. He had been so hot for days.
Yes, but yeah, I mean, Brokedown is just such a goddamn beautiful song. It's just so good. No matter whenever you hear it, like 70s, 80s, 90s, whenever time period you hear it, it still has that emotion to it. And the only thing I ever liked better was a We Bid You Goodnight. Like I love that song in that spot, but you never get that. Like you hardly ever. So Brokedown is that perfect ending.
Right. I Bid You Goodnight disappeared for its second time, I guess, after Brent died. They might have done one or two that fall tour in 90, and then we're like, eh. Yeah. You know what's interesting before we get out of here? I shared something with you the other day about article from way back about Vince and talking about they said something about where he got the job, not because of how good of a keyboard player he was, but because he could sing the high harmony.
Interesting. That's always, but it worked, right? Like that's so great because it was just sort of like it fit, and it was a different vocal stylings than a lot of like what you were kind of used to with everything.
with Brent. Yeah, it was completely different from Brent.
Completely different than Brent, and he didn't have to, which meant also we weren't getting any more like Brent's tunes necessarily. You know what I mean? Like those were kind of shelved from then on, and it was sort of Vince's world. And Vince didn't need songs necessarily that he needed to solo on or sing by himself. He was such a fill-in, which I think was so perfect at that time for what they needed. And like shows like this, he fills in so well. Like it's such a great. This show especially just really is what you for Vince fans or what
for someone who's going to complain about Vince.
Yes, you like
right by the next year. Well, I mean, maybe even it was at this point every second or third night you'd get a samba or a way to go home, kind of thing, and that became grating when you kept getting. Yeah. But they were trying to just expand the voices, save Bobby's voice.
Right, and that was the thing though. Vince didn't have a lot of songs to sing on, so you get those songs repeated because those were the ones that his vocals fit into.
Hunter wrote the lyrics. The songs that Vince did with the Dead, Hunter wrote the lyrics.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, so
it works, another interesting thing in that article was that they basically paid him off to go away. They were like, "You can have the songs you wrote with us. You can own them. We aren't going to deal with that anymore." And sad.
It was so
maybe
tragic.
We'll talk about this tomorrow night. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit tomorrow night. I'll think
it's
the
so
article
tragic. Like Vince is just he's such a it's almost like a Shakespearean tragic figure. Like it's just such a
giving himself the Colombian necktie.
That's just it. Like the ending, it's all so sad. Like it's just and it was so. It's just another fable in the like everybody talks about dead keyboard players in the piano position. It's just such a thing.
The hot seat.
The hot seat until you got Clemente in there, but it's not really the same band. So I guess the curse is over, but it's really, it's just tragic. Like, and shows like this you listen to and you're like, man, Vince really did have a place in the band and really did have moments that really made sense. And that's one, I'm glad you appreciated this show for that. And it's one of the reasons I chose it because I know you love Vince and this one really stood out for me as far as him shining.
Are we going to do a pick a fish show now? Or do we want to do it tomorrow night?
I think we have to do it tomorrow night with Tim because I don't know what he wants to do. But I do know.
Right, because he has a vote. He can.
Right. He can veto whatever. But I will say, I do know our next Dead show, which will be the beginning of July, the first Tuesday in July, we are going to do 6/28/91, which was my first show ever at Mile High Stadium, my first Dead show. So I got to pick these last two because Kevin picked a couple. So we're going to do that. So if you want to listen ahead or listen a couple times, it'll be the 6/28/91 Mile High Stadium Grateful Dead show. So check it out. And we'll be back with that show at the beginning of next month. But tomorrow night we will pick the fish show for next week. So
right. Do you have the outro music?
Huh? Oh, I guess I can turn the music on. Where's the music at?
Yeah, tomorrow night, 9 Eastern. 6 Pacific, and make sure subscribe, leave a comment. We'd love to know what you think. You can become a member for $2.99 a month. We do hangs on Friday, lots of other stuff. We love you guys.
Thank you. See you guys.